Welcome back to another edition of Aspire's Technology Partners Data Streams. I'm Christian Chavez, your host, Data Center Cloud Solutions Architect at Aspire, and I'm in a conversation with our PSS from Cisco, Chris Kudlick. Welcome back, Chris.
Hey, Christian. Glad to be
Excellent.
back.
Hey, I kind of we finished up from our last conversation. We kind of did a walk through the data center modernization aspect, what it meant. We went from
hmm
what servers were to how we got to where we are today, ultimately ending up with APIs. We did touch upon how we got to virtualization, how that helped the server markets get more dense in terms of running workloads on your servers. We also talked about
hmm
hyperconverged, which brought the storage aspect of an infrastructure back into the servers. And then we talked about how APIs actually get us to bring infrastructure up in an automated way, maybe through self-service, maybe it's through an application deployment that automates the infrastructure for the developers. Again, the key point was we're trying to get to our applications faster to market, right? We want to get there, and how that's actually driving infrastructure. So we talked about this infrastructure piece, the servers, the storage, the hyperconverged, but there's one thing that you talked about in our previous conversation, and that was the management aspect of it. I think one of the key things that
Yep.
is really driving today's industry is how do we manage service today? Traditionally, it was either through some backend card where we can kind of remote into it and we had access to a server, right?
Yep.
And now we have
Exactly.
it where we did talk about the APIs and how APIs are everywhere today, which now gives us access to servers and infrastructure, not only on prem, but also in cloud. It gives us an opportunity to automate or leverage these APIs to manage from one central location. And ultimately, that's what we want, right? Is we want central management and faster
hmm
deployments, things like that. I know that you had mentioned Cisco Intersight, something that I've worked with heavily to manage UCS servers, but there's a lot more to that. Um, Tell us about the
Yep.
server management aspect of service today, and what are we looking for when it comes to modernizing our data centers and getting us to a point where we feel like it's cloud, or maybe it puts us in a position to get to cloud, because ultimately we either have a cloud strategy or we don't, right? And those are some of the drivers that we're looking
Yep.
for. So, give me something. What have you seen? What have you done when it comes to server management?
So when we think about management way back in the day, to your point, it was all about just plugging cable into the back of that management port and having to go and do every single setting manually. Right? Any BIOS settings that you had to set, any RAID controller firmware, you had to set the local RAID, the IRQ settings, if you remember those from way back in the day, right? And the interrupts and everything for all the PCIe devices.
I might have that tattoo somewhere.
Yep. And it was always a mess, right? And rebooting the servers all the time. And an HPE, of course, had their own out there, right? The ILO or integrated lights out, and Dell had DRAC, and IBM had theirs. And so, in terms of managing that, it was a full-time job in itself. There were a ton of systems engineers out there that just had to be on top of that because that is just software, just like software is. Software is buggy, right? There's going to be bugs everywhere, and always, especially with virtualization, right? When you think about the hardware versions of software on the hardware, all of that should be identical. And I think a lot of us in this industry know that if something is a version out, it's usually the first thing that stands out if there's a issue migrating a virtual machine from server A to server B. And so, of course, Cisco was a pioneer, right? Coming into this overall management portion of it when we released UCS way back in 2009.
Hmm.
I'll give the MPLS group and John Chambers, a ton of kudos for this. But, they basically sent a think tank off and said, if you were going to do a server today, how would you do it? And they came back with UCS. And of course, the aspect of that was the Fabric Interconnects, which had UCS Manager running on there. And a lot of our customers bought into that, and they still have today. It's a solid solution. And right today we're actually number one even in the blade market because of that, because of UCS Manager, right? Being able to manage your entire server platform inside of a data center from a single console, and the aspect of really virtualizing the hardware when you think about it, right? Creating profiles and policies
Exactly.
and being able to deploy policies from a template very quickly. Um, and that was a huge game changer inside of the environment now, or in a lot of our data centers today. Now let's take it even a step further than that, right? So UCS Manager is great for blades that sit under it, but it's not going to be what you're going to use in order to manage stuff that might be in another data center. You might need another UCS manager over there, or a lot of our customers are starting to diversify their servers to the point where they're distributing them to a ton of other sites just to keep things local. So if I have a branch site, if I'm a branch bank or something like that, and I might have 10 or 15 employees at a bank and they need local resources, well, I might have one or two servers sitting out there. UCS Manager was pretty limited in terms of managing everything that was under it. That's where we came out with Intersight, right? And being able to manage every single server environment across the world, across the globe, from an as a service platform, which we call Intersight. And we're starting to see a ton of customers and customer satisfaction going way up, especially just on the management alone by going into Intersight. And I would say that probably, I mean, there's so many great aspects of managing things from an as a service. First one is, of course, the capability of any changes or any enhancements or any new features come out very rapidly, right? Because when we're talking about an as a service, we're talking about a CI/CD type of environment, very similar to applications that our customers are running for themselves, in order to engage their customers or to engage their employees. And being able to push out new features, being able to push out new fixes, being able to do enhancements in a matter of like hours or days as opposed to like months, right? Or
Yeah.
even years in certain instances is huge, especially in this industry. And so the other aspect of this is really when we think about the supporting of it. And so being able to connect directly into the support system of Cisco from Intersight is huge as well. Connected TAC. Um, as we know, Christian, and I know you've probably been through this as well, hardware, does go bad, right? I'll
Mhm.
say it from the Cisco side, and
And
if there's a hardware vendor out there that says their hardware is never going to die or there's not
yeah.
going to be a problem with it, they are lying to you. Go the other way, right? And so but it's what happens when that happens, right? And
Right.
we all know that it happens in the most inopportune times. It happens when you're sitting on the couch in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. It happens when you're at your brother, your sister's wedding. It happens. It happens in the most inopportune times in our industry. It's just the way it happens.
Mhm.
And so, imagine if a server goes down. Let's say a DIMM goes bad, a hard drive goes bad, and being able to see that happen from an as a service, connected TAC is there 24/7, 365 around the globe, right? There's always going to be a TAC engineer there for you. And then being able to see that, being able to diagnose it and say, oh, DIM just went bad in Omaha. Well, living here in Delaware, I probably don't want to fly to Omaha to replace a DIM. But if TAC sees that happen, then they can automatically ship out that DIM to Omaha. And being able to
Yeah.
have that proactive, support is huge. Not to mention the automation, the orchestration pieces that you were talking about earlier, the capability of actually merging, machine learning and artificial intelligence into this as well. So one of the big features that should be in every platform is the compatibility. Because we all know that there isn't one vendor that can do every single aspect of a data center. Even though Cisco, we make servers, right? We make network equipment, we make hyperconverged, but we still need hypervisors and applications and different things, backup solutions, that we partner up with, like Veeam and Cohesity and others out there, Commvault, and there's always going to be, being able to merge in and being able to be compatible with these ecosystem partners like Pure, NetApp, etc., and being able to run a compatibility matrix against your hardware and saying, is my hardware able to be supported? And do I know that there's not any bug issues here? Do I know that if I call Cisco or NetApp or Pure, et cetera, that this is going to be supported because this version is saying that it's supported. Well, if you go online and you try and do that compatibility matrix look yourself,
Oh, geez.
you're just going to be inundated with, a lot of information, right?
Right. Yeah.
I always laugh that, anytime that my kids can't fall asleep, I print out one of the Cisco Press books, I give it to them, and then they're asleep in 2 minutes, right? But being able to determine that and see that based off of your own customized environment is huge. Right? And being able to see whether or not my contract status is in check, being able to see whether there is a fuel notice that might be affecting my environment, and being able to act on that. But being able to also integrate in the VMwares and the Pures and the NetApps and the Veeams and the Cohesities, et cetera, being able to integrate that into the as a service to start being able to monitor their solutions that are on top of ours. Um, as well as the automation and orchestration pieces that you were talking about earlier, like HashiCorp and Terraform and Ansible, and being able to automate all of this from a single as a service interface that I can run from Google Chrome or I can run from the Intersight application on my iPhone is huge. I mean,
Mhm.
it's such a game changer in our industry right now. We've seen it from the networking side with the Meraki dashboard. We're seeing it with Intersight inside of the data center, SecureX inside of security. And we're going to start seeing it probably soon with Nexus dashboard, right? Being able to see that as a service. So there's a lot of this is really starting to come around, and a lot of our customers are really enjoying this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, what I'm seeing a lot of is that I mean, yeah, I've used Intersight and the opportunity there to add not only just the server management aspect of it, but as you had mentioned, there are other things that are getting integrated into that from a management perspective. So I can look at vCenter from Intersight. I can look at containers. I can look at Pure or NetApp. Like I can look at my storage piece. So the integration of a single pane of glass, right? Old school term, I think nowadays, but from that perspective, right, is I get to manage all this from a single location, and you said it's web based,
Yeah.
so I can do it from anywhere, including an app on my iPhone. But a lot of times, what we're doing is because if you look at all those pieces that I just mentioned, infrastructure pieces that you're putting inside of your environment, and whether it's hyper converged or converged, everything comes with its own management portal, right? And I always say that one of the benefits is that it comes with its management portal, but then when you're selling multiples of everything, you have multiple management portals, and nothing ever really. You're kind of like going back and forth when you're trying to manage your infrastructure, and then you get a platform like Intersight that starts integrating a lot of that into one. And it gives you the opportunity not only to manage it from a single location, but again, going back to that API, I can pull information from my infrastructure, whether I program it myself or whether I look to some other application that integrates with Intersight that pulls information.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's about management of everything, and I don't think we've gotten to a single source or management portal yet because there's still a lot of things that need to be integrated. But again, I don't know if we'll ever get to that. Right? It's kind of my thing where
Yeah.
if you can get the best of everything in one aspect, meaning if I can get my total infrastructure for like what I'll say data center,
Yeah.
and then I have something separate for like networking,
Mhm.
I don't know if I'd want everything in one. Right? I think it would just be too much of a mashup. But again, that's just my opinion
Oh yeah.
and how I would feel. But I'd still at the same time, if I'm going to manage anything from my infrastructure, meaning anything that lives on the server
Yeah.
or actually talks to a cloud that is sort of like augmented to my on-prem infrastructure and be able to manage from that perspective, I think is going to be key in modernizing data centers today, right? Because again, um, it's not about we're trying to put everything in one, but how does your IT teams, how do your development teams actually help themselves, right? Self-service. How do I get infrastructure up, or how do I let my developers, build on-prem or cloud-based infrastructure through automation?
Right.
Um, but having that central point through an API I think, is kind of like the key benefit when it comes to, in this case, Intersight, right? Again, going back to the APIs, I think API everywhere is really what's going on, including the
Absolutely.
servers themselves, right?
Hmm.
We know that servers are talking to some type of API, um, and once we have access to servers, meaning Intersight has attached itself to Cisco UCS. Anything running on UCS or attached to that, we can actually have visibility into it. And the other benefit that I want to talk about is the additional features that are being placed in here that is available to interact with your on-prem or cloud. Meaning, we talked about IWO, right, or workload optimization. This is a feature that's been added. So now I actually get to look at my infrastructure or my virtualization or my virtual machines, see how they're performing, see what I can do with them. Are we right sizing? Are we over provisioned, under provisioned? Where can we gain some dollars? Where can we, where are we wasting dollars? Things like that.
Exactly.
Talk about some of these plugins, because I know you're doing a lot around integrations. And
Yeah.
one of the things that was really key to me that I'm really looking forward to is the cloud management aspect of it. Right?
Yeah.
How do we take what's on prem and get us? And we'll get to that one. But I'm just saying, like, to me, that's kind of the key piece, right? We're moving from the server side to the modernization to how do we get to cloud if that's our strategy. If not, how do we treat it like cloud through a platform like Intersight? So, I mean, talk about some of the features that are being added.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, well, the first part of, getting to the cloud is you got to create the connection, right? First, which is
Right.
usually through some sort of a network, right? And a lot of the cloud providers out there, AWS, Azure, Google, they have what they call the direct connects, right? And being able to almost have a pipe that's just running from your data center to theirs. And then also the aspect of a VPN, right? Or virtual private network, which is really the other way of getting around into the cloud environment. Well, what we've also seen is that customers want the capability of moving things in and out of the cloud, like you were saying. And, in terms of a hybrid cloud, that's really what it means to me is the capability of if I want something to run in the cloud, I can just move it there and run it. And if I want to move it back on-prem, I can. And the first aspect of that is the network. And so we do have capabilities with Cisco ACI Anywhere, which is really the application-centric infrastructure, which is the code that can run on our Nexus 9000s in a spine leaf type of architecture. But we also have the aspect of cloud APICs, which means that I can create my network policies and my application profiles on-prem, and I can sync them to the cloud. So as an application moves, that network is already up. And being able to not have to redo all the security, the network policies, et cetera, in the cloud because it's already connected in through the Nexus dashboard applications, that's a huge part of it. Now, when we get into IWO, right, or Intersight Workload Optimizer, that really does give you another, bag of tricks in itself. Being able to see, like you were saying, the resource utilization, but also seeing which cloud it should run in and at what size. And so we've seen plenty of times where customers, are in a panic and they're like, well, our CIO wants to move everything to the cloud. We need to move everything like within the next couple months. And so they move everything in and everything is of the extra large size, right? Because they're just like, I don't have time to even see whether or not, there's, how many resources these things are using. I just know that, bigger is always better, which as we've seen also, it normally isn't, right? There's actually instances where resources that aren't being utilized can actually slow down some systems in certain instances. But in that instance where they're throwing things out there as extra large, of course, AWS and Azure are like, wow, this is awesome because you're paying for all these resources that you might not be needing. But
Right.
very easily, like within a matter of 5 or 10 minutes, you can run a capacity plan from Intersight Workload Optimizer that says, if I'm going to move these applications with the historical performance values of this application, if I want to move these to AWS EC2, what size should I be using? How much, given my contract with AWS, how much is this going to cost me? Is there going to be any performance degradation? Should I have maybe half of it there and half of it on-prem? And the workload optimizer can actually run these calculations for you and give you a report on, a lot of applications. Yeah, maybe they should be running in AWS and they might run well there. And they might run for less money. And you would want to know that, if I was a CIO or somebody, but ultimately being able to determine that, we've seen customers out there that have saved millions like of dollars. Like we had one customer that was down in Virginia, where they did that. They threw all of their infrastructure into Azure, and they were spending $8 million a year. And so
Wow.
we turned on at that time CWAM, which is Cisco Workload Optimization Manager, which is the on-prem version. So you can, absolutely do it as a virtual appliance as opposed to in the cloud. But they ran this against their Azure environment, and they were able to turn that $8 million investment in Azure into two.
That's amazing.
Right. So, and we're talking about like zero, I mean, we're talking like day zero, return on investment or ROI,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Being
Yeah.
able to just, turn eight into two and not affect the performance and probably even improve the performance when we think about it. That's huge, right? For a lot of our customers. And in terms of moving these applications into the cloud, um, moving things into EC2 or into traditional Azure is, especially in the days of virtualization, is, not that complicated, right? You just basically, change it into that virtual machine type of instance inside AWS and Azure. But when we get into other features of it, when we talk about turning a traditional application into a containerized application or cloud native application, as we hear, as opposed to monolithic, these take a lot of it takes a lot of resources, right? And it takes a lot of development power. A lot of these applications have to be rewritten, into either the containerization type of realm of cloud native or even into a serverless, type of environment like AWS and Azure both have. But that does take, some development specialty. And some of our customers that have that customized application have the resources and are, pumping a lot of, resources into making these applications cloud native. But a lot of those customers also have stuff that's off the shelf where you're at the mercy of the application developer themselves. And if they're not going that route, keeping those on prem could actually be a good piece of that. And the other aspect of this too is clouds do go down. We've seen that
Yeah.
plenty of times. We've seen AWS go down, we've seen Azure go down, and so nothing is 100% uptime, that we've seen, right? Whether it's
Right.
on-prem or in the cloud. So being able to prepare for that is a hybrid cloud, right? Being able to say, if the cloud goes down, I at least have my stuff on-prem that I have spun up probably, that all my resources and my employees and my customers can still access until the cloud comes back up, and vice versa. If there's a big power outage or, a big power surge, or, the air conditioning goes and everything starts melting down, if you have a copy in the cloud and it's all spun up, then you're safe,
Right.
at least until you rebuild your data center after the meltdown. But, these things do happen, but hybrid cloud is really the answer to this.
Yeah. And so decision making, that's what it comes down to, right?
Absolutely.
The decision making of, I get this question a lot, like, what should I move to the cloud?
Yeah.
Or what does that strategy look like? Can you help me with the strategy of moving to the cloud? And the first thing I look at, it's like, well, can you determine that based on what you have running on prem today? And so ultimately that drives your decision where you go, like how are your applications written? So that's where you go.
Mhm.
What's the need? What's driving you there? Are in a previous video cast we did, I talked about two drivers to cloud are either I want to get out of the data center space, right? I don't want to buy hardware anymore. And I want to realize the benefits of having all this availability of resources at, in the
Yeah.
cloud, or I'm building an application or I'm moving an application to the cloud, right? And those are kind of my drivers, and that's just two decision paths right there. Let alone what are you doing on prem today? How are you deploying in case of application? How are you deploying application today on prem? Or in case of I want to get out of the data center space, well, what's your utilization or resources levels at, right? So
Yeah.
all these decision based decisions that you have to make, you have to you either do it on your own, and that could be either through an Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
Or running some kind of tool. But in this case, you had mentioned, right? So IWO, or you had mentioned CWAM, which is the on-prem version of IWO,
Yeah.
gives you that visibility into resource utilization, right? And not only that, it gives you the planning aspect of it. And
Absolutely.
that's, to me, that's like the key piece, because if you want to make a decision on what to move and how do you move it and what size do you need, and yes, we have to live with t-shirt sizes, and it'll at least tell you what t-shirt you're going to fit in. But here's
Yep.
in I want to touch on this real quick, is the benefit is not only that, but in order for you to move that, you need you if it says, hey, you're running this application here and it fits in this t-shirt size, well, you've never run it in that t-shirt size, so you don't know what how it's going to react, or it's how it's going to run, right?
Right.
It's making a decision for you, but it gives you the ability to actually run that decision on prem first, right? So we right size the infrastructure
Yep.
to be able to say, okay, now that we've right sized it based on utilization, how's it performing now? Do we need to adjust? And once we get to a level of comfortability,
Mhm.
you can then say, okay, now we have this t-shirt size and we know it's going to be performant and run in that infrastructure if you do migrate to the cloud, right?
Yep.
So our decision is now based on machine learning, right? It's not some guy trying to figure it out with an Excel spreadsheet. And so
Exactly.
we're getting, to the point, right? And that kind of moves into the next piece was, we have the platforms, or the like Intersight, right? We have
Yeah.
the platforms to be able to manage this infrastructure, but the tools that are available to us now allow us to make intelligent decisions, or not us, but it gives us the information that we need to now move to the cloud, right? If that's our strategy.
Yep.
And another nice thing, and I'll let you touch on this, is it also allows us to redo the infrastructure if we're going to keep on prem. So I can actually plan, or it should tell me that plan and say, hey, if I move
Hmm.
all these workloads to the cloud, what is left on prem and what do I need to run on prem, right? So
Absolutely.
now it's not looking just what you're moving. So you're looking at a full package of decision making that's happening on your cloud journey, right? And that's why
Absolutely.
I always say, you got to fix the infrastructure, you got to modernize the data center before you can realize the cloud benefits, because ultimately the cloud benefits, if you don't do it right, you just mentioned it. In Azure,
Yep.
you're paying 8 million, or you're paying 2 million. Which one do you want to
Exactly.
go with first, right? So do it right the first time, and so I'll let you talk about the CWAM piece, the IWO, or
Yeah.
maybe there's some other aspects, because touch upon how do we get these applications to cloud, right? So
Yep.
not just the decision making, but how do we get them?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you were spot on there where you're talking about actually doing the capacity planning for the hardware and infrastructure on prem. And so, yeah, not only can we run the cloud calculations from CWAM and IWO, but we can also say, if I'm going to keep this on prem, and let's say I want to use Hyperflex, how many nodes, what processor should I be using, how much RAM, how much storage, should it be NVMe, should it be all flash, can I get away with spinning disk, being
Right.
able to size those into the capacity so that we're not oversizing, we're not undersizing, we're giving you the right size for what you need based off of the trends. And the other piece of that too, which I know that you were bringing up earlier, is the APIs, right? And being able to, the more information that you can feed into IWO and CWAM, the better the decision making is going to be. So, for instance, I might have App Dynamics, which is the Cisco APM, Application Performance Management solution out there, and it might be seeing that there is a break inside of one of the shopping carts, or maybe there's an issue on accessing pictures from AWS S3 that I might be showing on my retail website, and it might be causing a bad customer experience. Well, being able to relay that information to IWO and into CWAM, into the decision making tool, and being able to actually make an intelligent decision upon, oh, well, I have a copy of those pictures on prem, maybe I should maneuver and not connect into S3 because there might be a connection issue with S3. Maybe I should connect on prem so that I can at least show the pictures out to my customers. Being able to integrate in with other things like Thousand Eyes, right? Thousand Eyes is really the eyes of the world, right? And being able to see whether or not there is a communication issue with AWS or Azure, Office 365, Salesforce, Oracle Cloud, right? SAP Cloud, being able to see all of the sensors around the world and being able to make intelligent pathing decisions is another thing that you can also feed into there. Being able to feed in ACI metrics, being able to feed in some security stuff from like Tetration and some other security vendors out there as well, and Pure and NetApp, and being able to take storage metrics to see, and even Hyperflex, for instance, of am I trending of adding a lot of space where I really need to add some, or do I need to maybe go into a different tier of S3 inside of AWS? All of these things, interact in there with APIs, right? And being able to even notify, somebody by even having that interact with ServiceNow, for instance, right? And being able to create a ticket or being able to create an alert, and all of these things kind of integrate into a decision engine. And that's really what IWO and CWAM are. And it's becoming extremely critical, not only, of knowing what's happening in your environment, but also taking immediate action on those. And a lot of our customers are going that route of basically turning it on and letting it automate itself, so that all these decisions are made automatically based off of machine data, so that it kind of takes the human error piece of it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really cool stuff that we're into these days, Christian, here, especially
Yeah.
a lot of it.
And looking back, I mean, if at the infrastructure piece, right? So just kind of to recap, and some of the things that we were talking about is the data center modernization piece. I think is really key to moving. If that's your strategy, right? If you're moving to cloud, I think it's a key piece in making sure that at the end of the day you're not overpaying,
Right.
right? And I think that's very key. Mentioning that who you worked with, and they were paying $8 million in Azure, to me is really what's driving. You hear that people are coming back from the cloud, and reasons for that. I mean, $8 million
Yeah.
is huge, right? So you
Absolutely.
missed the mark. You missed the mark where you think you're going to be paying cheaper in the cloud, but I think the sizing is one of the downsides to it, and the other thing too is a lot of unknowns inside of the cloud. How do we manage it? How do we run it? How do we leverage a lot of those key tools, those key automation components inside of cloud to get the best out of it? And those are some of the key pieces. So spot on with the architecture, where we're looking for an on-prem way of doing things like cloud, right? Through
Mhm.
APIs, management aspects of it. Firmware upgrades. How do we do that through a single point, pane of glass, as well as upgrades? We didn't mention, and I'll just mention it real quick, is single push button upgrades for VMware, firmware, and all these things. Right there now, it's become an automated thing because of APIs. But at the end of the day, I think one of the key pieces to moving to cloud is right sizing the infrastructure. Right, as we finish this off, right sizing to me is the key piece if you really want to realize the benefits of cloud
Yeah.
and the cost savings that you can have there. But it has to start on, like, in your own data center today, moving forward, if you're looking to do that. Any last words of advice to the viewers?
I will say, it's been a pleasure here, talking with you, Christian. And, I really love working with Aspire as well. They're definitely one of our partners of choice here at Cisco. And, love that you are doing this podcast for all of our customers, that we share together. And for any prospective customers, Aspire is a terrific partner to work with, especially Christian. We've been working together for years. And,
Yeah,
and also, go out there and, check out Intersight, talk to your local Cisco teams, and, we can absolutely, spin up and show you some demonstrations of what Intersight and I will have to offer you as well. And so
definitely.
it's great being on here with you today, Christian. It really
Yeah, it was great having you on. I appreciate your time and your insights, and I look forward to another conversation with you.
sounds great, Christian. Appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you.
See you.